Major approaches and methodologies in the study of global economic history. Introduction. The study of global economic history requires a multidisciplinary approach, drawing from economics, history, political science, sociology, and anthropology. Scholars use diverse methodologies to examine economic development, trade networks, technological progress, financial institutions, and labor markets over time. These approaches help in understanding why economies grow or decline, how institutions shape economic outcomes, and the role of global interactions in shaping wealth and power. This document explores the major approaches and methodologies used in global economic history, highlighting their strengths and limitations. Major approaches to the study of global economic history. Different approaches provide distinct perspectives on economic history, focusing on factors like institutions, technological progress, globalization, and economic structures. 1. The institutional approach. The institutional approach examines how political, legal, and social institutions influence economic development. Scholars argue that the quality of institutions such as property rights, governance, and financial systems determines economic success or stagnation. Key theories and scholars. Douglas North, New Institutional Economics emphasize the role of institutions in economic growth, particularly property rights and contract enforcement. Acemoglu and Robinson, Why Nations Fail, 2012, proposed that inclusive institutions, which support market competition and property rights, lead to prosperity, whereas extractive institutions which concentrate wealth and power result in economic decline. Examples in global economic history. The success of industrialized nations Britain, the U.S., is linked to strong institutions that protected innovation and property rights. The decline of the Ottoman Empire and Qing, China is partly attributed to weak economic institutions and resistance to reform. Strengths and limitations. Strengths highlights the importance of law, governance, and incentives in shaping economies. Explains long-term economic divergence between countries. Limitations. Difficult to quantify institutional impact. Institutions evolve over time, making causal relationships complex. 2. The globalization approach. This approach focuses on the role of global trade, investment, and migration in shaping economic history. It examines how global connections influence economic development, inequality, and technological diffusion. Key concepts. World Systems Theory. Immanuel Wallerstein divides the world into core industrialized nations, periphery resource-dependent economies, and semi-periphery emerging economies. Dependency theory suggests that poorer nations remain economically dependent on wealthier nations, limiting their industrial development. Examples in global economic history. The Columbian Exchange, 16th century, reshaped global economies by introducing new crops, diseases, and trade networks. 19th century British imperialism linked colonies to the global economy, but often at the cost of their domestic industries. Strengths and limitations. Strengths explains the rise of global trade networks and their impact on different economies. Useful in analyzing colonialism, trade dependencies, and global financial crises. Limitations. Oversimplifies economic relationships into core periphery models. Underestimates the ability of peripheral nations to industrialize, e.g., China's rise in the 20th century. 3. The technological and industrial approach. This approach examines how technological advancements and industrialization have driven economic transformation. Key theories. Karl Marx argued that technological progress reshapes economic structures, often leading to class struggles. Joseph Schumpeter introduced the concept of creative destruction, where innovation disrupts old industries and creates new ones. Examples in global economic history. The Industrial Revolution, 18th–19th century, led to mechanization, urbanization, and economic expansion. The Digital Revolution, 20th–21st century, transformed global economies through automation and AI. Strengths and limitations. Strengths. Highlights the role of scientific advancements and industrialization in shaping economies, useful in understanding economic transitions e.g. from agrarian to industrial societies. Limitations. Does not fully explain why some nations industrialize faster than others. Overemphasizes technology while underestimating institutional and social factors. 4. The quantitative cliometric approach. The cliometric approach, or new economic history, applies statistical and mathematical models to historical data. Key contributions. Uses GDP estimates, labor productivity, data, and trade records to analyze economic trends. Robert Fogel applied cliometric techniques to reassess the economic impact of the railroads. In 19th century America, Angus Madison developed long-term GDP growth estimates for different civilizations. Examples in global economic history. Reconstructing pre-modern GDP to compare economic growth across centuries. Measuring the economic impact of slavery, industrialization, and trade policies. Strengths and limitations. Strengths. Provides empirical evidence to support historical theories. Allows for cross-country economic comparisons. Limitations. Relies on incomplete or unreliable historical data. Cannot fully capture cultural and institutional factors. 5. A comparative economic history approach. This method compares different economies across time and space to identify patterns of development and divergence. Examples. Comparing the Industrial Revolution in Britain versus China, analyzing economic recovery after wars e.g. post-WE Germany versus post-WWI Austria. Strengths and limitations. Strengths. Provides insights into why economies develop differently. Highlights historical turning points and policy lessons. Limitations. Differences in historical contexts make comparisons challenging. B. Methodologies in global economic history. Scholars use a variety of methodologies to study economic history. 1. Archival research. Uses historical documents, trade records, and government reports. Example, studying the East India Company's trade logs to understand colonial economies. 2. Economic modeling and simulations. Uses mathematical models to reconstruct past economic trends. Example, estimating the impact of Black Death on European wages. 3. Oral histories and ethnographic methods. Gathers first-hand accounts of economic events. Example, interviews with former factory workers about deindustrialization. 4. Geographic and environmental analysis. Examines how climate and geography affect economies. Example, the impact of the Little Ice Age on agriculture in Europe. Conclusion. The study of global economic history combines institutional analysis, globalization theories, technological approaches, quantitative methods, and comparative studies by using diverse methodologies such as archival research, statistical modeling, and environmental analysis. Scholars gain deeper insights into how economies evolved over time. Each approach provides unique strengths, and combining them allows for a more comprehensive understanding of global economic development. Would you like to explore a specific case, study, or economic period in more detail?